3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And joining me for this episode is Lieutenant Colonel Steve Alexander. Steve, how you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great, my friend. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm glad to have your time. Let's open up with this. Let's tell people who you are, your background.
Okay, we can certainly do that. As I said before, I'm a Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Army retired. I started my career in 1983 and retired in 2011. Actually, a combat veteran with Iraqi freedom in 2004. I was taken care of by the big guy upstairs. I ended up with a Purple Heart and a combat action badge, and it's had a few pretty intense moments. We'll leave it at that. But anyway, and all during my life. Again, I was born in 1953, and in the 70s and such, and even in the 60s as a kid, I was always fascinated with UFOs and that whole thing. And then, it's just a long story. In 1993, when the X-Files came out, about that third episode after the military, between the Delta-shaped aircraft, I, inadvertently started a national organization that at one point got international, but I was a captain in the Army at the same time. So that got real confusing. And I know I jump around a lot, and the Army doctor said I had a few screws knocked loose. So bear with me if you would.
Oh, no problem. I mean, we're just treat this like a conversation, like we're hanging out having coffee.
Gotcha. That's great. Perfect.
So your military career began back in the 80s?
Yeah, 1983, I enlisted. I was actually in the field artillery, and then a couple years into it, I went to officers candidate school. I became commissioned a second lieutenant, and then I finished the next 25 years or so as an officer. Made it from second lieutenant up to lieutenant colonel, and was a LTC when I retired in 2011.
So in your military career, have you bared witness to any kind of UFOs or any kind of abnormal activity?
No, the truth be said is absolutely. The answer is yes. In the summer of, it was 2000 and I think it's 2002, I was training officer candidates up at Fort Meade, South Dakota, near the town of Sturgis. And they were doing a land navigation exercise in late afternoon into the early evening and into the evening. But anyway, it seemed like all along the horizon, and there were a couple other officers and such that got a look at this. Again, we didn't, have all the high-tech stuff. I'd love to have had an iPhone back then. But Delta-shaped craft, and it just, they were just out there. Whether it's like they were watching us, but seen by 4 or 5 military guys, and then even earlier in my career, I actually was an instructor in what's called Command General Staff College. It was for training school for officers, but earlier than that, even in a thing called Combined Armed Staff Services School, we had a session where I actually did a UFO presentation on a thing that had happened in southern Colorado back in 1994. And that was called the NORAD incident, but we'll probably get into that at some point. But long story short, after we forgot to turn off the camera off, and some guy that later on became a full colonel in the Colorado Guard actually told us the story of him and some buddies being on a camping trip up in the mountains. I can't remember exactly where Breckenridge. It's been a year or two, but anyway, they recalled seeing it certainly wasn't an Army helicopter, and I've ridden in them, and I've seen them come and go, and they saw something out there, and it's pretty fascinating description. It's been so long now that he probably wouldn't mind me talking about it, but they had a sighting as well. So there's probably a lot of military guys that have seen things that are hesitant to say anything, and certainly about the pilots. As soon as you say you saw a UFO, you're grounded, and then they got to do the psych eval and put you in Section 8 or whatever. But that's changing some of the TikTok sightings with the U.S. Navy, and I'll be honest, I was surprised at President Trump when he was in office. The last couple days out there, he says, "Hey, guess what, y'all?" And but that did not happen. That caught me off guard.
Yeah, I thought he'd be the guy for certain to speak.
I would have bet my career on it, and I would have lost. But I really thought he would have been, "Hey, guess what?" And so.
Well, it's not impossible that he didn't speak about it because he didn't know much about it. I mean, consider this: the president is in office 4 to 8 years. So I don't know that they have the clearance to know these things, right? I'm sure there's people, career military people who have, like you, lengthy careers, and they have the clearance because they're there not for 8 years. They're there for the long term of their life, their career. Those are the people in the know.
Well, you hear things of all the time about the Trilateral Commission, and there's really a government that really runs our government. There's the worldwide government that's already up and operational, and we're all just chess pieces in the match. And so what the truth is, I'm not sure, but I really thought that, somewhere in the last 6 years more would have been revealed. It's
Bill Clinton made an attempt, and they point blank told him he doesn't have clearance for certain records.
They shut him down, and So sooner or later, I think, something will get leaked or something will happen, and who knows what.
Yeah, it's funny business with military, and I say this often. It's hard for a prideful, strong military to admit that there's something in the skies that are beyond their control. Nor do we have a defense for. Not to mention, it's a great scapegoat. Whenever we want to test new projects, what better thing to blame?
Sure, and in that regard, I think probably in the early 80s and such, there were F-117 stealth bombers flying all over Groom Lake area in Utah, and I'm sure they're contributed to a lot of UFO sightings.
Sure,
and same with the U-2 and the SR-71 and other aircraft that were tested out there that were reported as something other than what they were.
Yeah, and it's a great scapegoat, so there's a lot of motivation for the government not to disclose fully what this is because, one, we lose our smokescreen. Two, the world organized religions would take issue with this because, as you see, they're gradually preparing people for it, right? The Catholic Church is saying they'll baptize them. Other churches say they're gonna, or they're the devil, one or the other.
There's all that, the old demonic side of it all, that they're not metal and they're not aluminum and they're not some kind of alloy. They're, demonic manifestations of that way. So I've in my days as the UFO Institute founder and director, we would have meetings, and we would have, half of the guys are kind of nuts and bolts like me. I want to tap it with my hammer and look at it and say, hey, what's it? And then there's the metaphysical side where, one night I had a guy say, well, come on down to the parking lot at the new Walmart store at 2:00 in the morning, and we'll bring some in and let you see them. So, I showed up with a couple of my friends, and they showed up with a couple of their friends, and they're all oohing and eyeing and describing these great intricate, spacecraft, something out of, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And, I'm looking at a bunch of empty shopping carts down at the end of the place by the fence. So and that's one thing I struggle with is all the dimensional aspect of this, how somebody could fly a flying saucer over your house in a neighborhood and pull you out at 1:30 in the morning and put you back in there at 3:30 in the morning. And so,
and you're talking about very significant, technology that exceeds us by a few thousand years or better, right? So when you apply that kind of thought to it, so I say this a lot on the show. Let's examine what we have as far as technology and then add 2,000 years to it. It's impressive, right? And you got to bear in mind too, we've only been broadcasting for a little over 100 years, right? And it takes about 100,000 years for a radio wave to cross the galaxy, just our galaxy, let alone the universe. So if something is more advanced than us, you imagine we see how technology leapfrogs in just our cell phones. It's insanity. It literally. Oh, yeah. But each generation, they probably have phones that are way better than what we see in the market today, but they have to, drip feed this out. Some people can't handle it. Change is a big deal for humans, believe it or not.
I can, certainly. And like I said, for 200 years ago, it got dark at 5:00 out west and you went to bed or you went to the saloon. So anyway, but yeah, amazing. It's 200
funny.
Years from now, who knows what it'll look like. Just the last 200.
In the next 20 years, we're going to be impressed. We're talking about Neuralink and eventually we're going to have social media and the applications of our phone just in our head. We won't even need a device. And now if again, this is our technology currently, you're talking about a sophisticated technology that has thousands of years on it. They've probably been utilizing this very technology for many years prior. Like when people refer to the grays as speaking at them telepathically, they probably have an advanced program that's embedded in the head. And let's, consider what the human brain looks like under scan. When you look at it in imaging, it has receptors. We notice. For people that have sinus problems, high-pitched sound waves that you would otherwise not hear would trouble you. So we know it's unclear what we're up against. What is clear, however, UFOs are real. There's no denying that anymore. We now know to a certainty they're real. What's controlling them? That's the mystery still, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you're probably way, much younger than I am. But anyway, there's a song called In the Year 2525. It was written back in the 60s. And, just for a lark, you ought to listen to that sometime. You'd be,
I'll check it
pretty
out.
Fascinated. Yeah. In the Year 2525, Zager and Evans.
It's funny because there's a song from the 90s by Porno for Pyros, and it's called Pets. And it's talking about how our observers would notice that we're incapable of behaving like a species, and eventually we're just going to be pets to them.
I can see that, man's inhumanity to man, and I've seen enough of it.
I'm sure,
in Iraq or where else, In a
lengthy military career, you've seen your fair share of humanity's ugly face.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen it in Panama where, you're in one hilltop, it lives the drug cartel leader with his, driving his, Maseratis and Ferraris and whatever. And then in the next hill over, there's a guy hunting, lizards in a loinskin with a spear looking for dinner. So,
we live in a society where, and they're glorifying a show on Hulu. It's about Jeffrey Dahmer. And, people are fascinated, but they're not realizing this was a real event. This is a person who hunted people.
And then apparently it's like they're I guess it's Netflix second rated show in history or whatever like that. And just, that's not really my thing to follow Jeff Dahmer and all that stuff. But there's a fascination with that subject, and there's millions of people that are, they got their DVR set and whatever else.
And so imagine a sophisticated technology, a sophisticated species that came here to study us, because I believe we're being studied. And do they communicate with these creatures that they found that are killing each other, eating each other, blowing each other up over ideologies and crazy differences? And we're very individualized people, right? And for them to do it, and I say this a lot, I repeat a lot, but for them to do what they did to make it here to study and observe us, you have to behave like a species. You have to think there's a singular point of interest that they all share. They don't, they're not worried about the new fashion and what religion you are. None of that concerns them. So until we get to that point, I don't think we're going to have communication directly. So outside of your event in Carolina, have you had any other sightings in your investigations?
Not at all. Just one. Actually, well, it's a half truth, but I think later on I figured out it was maybe an Army helicopter. It was in the mid '70s. I was up near Buena Vista, Colorado, and I was by myself. But I saw a green light in the sky just kind of go up and down a little bit. Not the radical, drastic, left, right turns, all that stuff, but just kind of going across the sky. And I figured out pretty much it wasn't a helicopter or it wasn't an airplane, but. Later on, after watching, Huey helicopters and Blackhawks and Chinooks and other helicopters coming, pretty sure I saw a helicopter. So just the one up in South Dakota near Sturgis was a big deal, and then the other one in Colorado with seen by the guy that became a colonel and some of his friends.
So for me, a lot of the military people and law enforcement I've spoken to, and I do a lot of off-podcast interviews. I'm actually going to continue to do more. Created a whole new email for a new chapter. They don't want to speak publicly, and I don't blame them because we're still in that kind of that part of our human existence where certain things are unaccepted for social circles or professional circles, and ridicule will follow regardless, because that's people. And if you want to see that version of people, go on social media, say something positive, and somehow someone's going to spin it to something negative. So we're still there. So for you, you've spoken to probably a large number of military people about this phenomenon. How many cases are you hearing about?
Well, actually in the heyday of the UFO Institute, and I haven't done so much in the last few years, but way back when I we're talking about the late 90s and then late 90s, pretty much after 2001, everybody's emphasis went to the global war on terror and all that. But before that, I would as everybody knew I was a colonel, and I ended up being on a lot of TV stations in Colorado Springs, where I was living at the time. And I would get calls and contacted, and I would meet military guys at the local village inn, and they would I was an F-4 pilot. There were three of us. We had just bombed Haiphong Harbor in Vietnam. We're crossing over Vietnam, heading across Laos, and they'll look up and they'll see something 10,000 feet above them. They know it's not one of ours, and it's not one of the Russians, and it's China was in no position to be doing that kind of stuff then. So I've had, I meet people like that. And then one of the fascinating things, and a friend of mine, obviously, Kenneth Dudley, and that's, the nuclear silos and what happened with him in the 70s and in the 80s when, UFOs, IACs, identified alien craft, whatever you want to call them, would come by and, for lack of a better word, flip the switch. And all of a sudden, 14 ICBM silos are now, running on generator and not capable of launching. So,
Huh.
so a lot of that information.
Yeah, a lot of that for
talk
me.
to those guys.
Yeah, for me, when I hear about the silos and the nuclear shutdowns, and it's both a message saying we could do this, and two, their real motivation for not letting us annihilate one another so the study could go on. Consider we're a study. They probably, for UFO sightings stem back hundreds of years, if not thousands. And that being said, they're monitoring our evolution. As probably, and I say this a lot too, there's probably a program they have running for a hybrid program, which would take a very long time to complete total. But at the end of the day, they wouldn't want us to annihilate us, because then they lose their entertainment, they lose their study, they lose the program they're running. So
we might be a TV show on their network,
yeah. I mean, can you think of a better show to watch? You got it all here on Earth: drama, murder.
Humans screwing it up,
crazy love stories. I mean, just it's an endless. There's endless information coming from this planet, and just not us, but there's many other species of living creatures on this planet. Right? Anywhere from the micro right up to insects and larger mammals. This is an interesting place to study if you're not from here, right? So you would want to see how it unfolds. So
for sure,
for you, and what are some of the interesting cases you come across that people have told you about?
Well, just the one I mentioned, like the three F-4 Phantoms are coming back from a bombing mission. That was a good one. And then again in the 70s and the 80s, and UFO silos being shut down. That was that's one of them there. We had a situation once where we had an investigation of an incident called the NORAD incident. And this happened back around November to December of 1994. And I want to give a shout out to a gentleman named Chris O'Brien. If you ever get a chance to track him down, he'd be a great guy to have on your show, because he's probably one of the finest UFO investigators in history. But there was an incident down in the Rock Creek Canyon in Colorado where somebody saw a UFO go over, and then the county sheriff there, and gosh, it's been so long, a gentleman named Norton, if I remember right, he got a phone call from NORAD to go check out in the Rock Creek area that some kind of aircraft or something might have crashed, unknown. He started that out. Now our group found out about it. We sent some investigators down there, and they did report seeing some military flatbed trucks with things on them covered with tarps, coming and going and this and that. So, and again, the sightings in that area went on for a few months here. And so that was what was going on with that. But at the end of the day, after 4 or 5 weeks of all this stuff, and I think I sent you a little bit of info on that. NORAD called and said, hey, just forget the whole thing. And in the meantime, the sheriff's been running around with deputies in the woods and in the mountains and the foothills, looking for traces of anything. And at the end of the day, they're just told to, forget about it. And this is, 6 weeks after they go find whatever it was and guard it, protect it, whatever. So.
For you, when you're in the during your career in military, was there a protocol if you ever had an incident or a sighting?
Not at all. Not that I recall. I'm sure as a lieutenant, a captain, and maybe even a major in those ranks, in that rank range, and the enlisted soldiers, I expect if they saw something, we go through the chain of command. You tell your battery commander, your company commander, and he would tell the up to the battalion, to the brigade, et cetera, et cetera. But there was no checklist of, if you see a UFO at X location, do this, do that, make a note of the grid coordinate. Nothing. Nothing like that. Nothing in that detail at all.
Do you think now, because of disclosure, and so there's disclosure, it's more on TV, it's more acceptable as a subject. They've even changed the acronym to UAP to make it more suitable for government.
Yeah.
Do you think now a lot of the retired military who possibly seen something, would they be more willing to speak up now?
Oh, I would think so. I would absolutely think so. We just, one of those situations I described where and then again, this is the 70s, early 80s. There were a couple of these things. The guy said that, we all saw it. We everything knew something was up above the silos, 20,000 feet, whatever. And at the end of the day, they brought in some JAG lawyers. Everybody signed in this paperwork. I will not talk about this incident until 5 years after I leave the military. And, otherwise, you're stuck there living in the barn that's actually your barracks type thing. So,
yeah, I mean, there was a gentleman I'd spoken to. I'm not going to say his name or rank because he's active. And I asked him, because he reached out through the anonymous email, and we had a lengthy conversation. And his incident wasn't fantastic. It was more concerning because of its proximity to the ship he was on.
Yeah.
And anyway, that being said, I said, well, what about when you retire? Because I believe he's looking to retire in the next 4 years. And he said, I probably won't because of the kind of clearance he has. Because that sort of clearance is, your oath extends that of your life with that kind of clearance. Is that?
Yeah, certainly. And if he's just doing like a 25-year career and he's going to plan on going on to doing, the same job as a contractor and make twice as much money or whatever, certainly he'll be silent about that. Maybe someday after that second career is done, he'll go public with that. Or, if he's in a situation, that'll be interesting to watch. But I'm sure there's a thousand events a year that aren't reported by military guys that, just because they don't want to lose their clearance and they don't want to lose this or that.
Yeah, it bothered me because he initially reached out because he listened to one of my early podcasts from a little over a year ago, or just under a year ago. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he said, your theories are straight on about, and he wouldn't say what or which episode. And it bothered me. I'm like, just tell me what episodes so I go back and listen to my own stuff. I form a lot of theory, and a lot of my theories, because I've witnessed nothing. A lot of my theory is based on my imagination and what I've researched, and I combine the two. And then I usually draw a parallel to what we do. Because, I always say, whatever we do, add some thousands of years to it, and, it give you a broad spectrum idea of what I think they're doing. But it bothered me because he never told me which one. He didn't reply to the emails after that. So,
just maybe got a little scared, but at least he came to you at the first part of it, which, good that he did that.
Yeah. His experience of what he knows versus what he saw troubled him because by description, it wasn't showing up on instruments, but they physically saw it. Him and a good group of people on a boat. And this is around the time the sun's rising, so they could see it in the distance. It's physical, but it's not showing up on instruments. And, typically when you hear about UFOs in the military, it's because it's showing up on instruments and then they get a visual on it. And so whatever this wasn't allowing the instruments to read it. And then after him saying that, it took some time to think. I'm like, well, why has that not been discussed anywhere else? And then you fast forward to the David Fravor incident, and you hear that this thing's breaking lock, it's jamming the radar. So it's almost like a show of what can be done. Because I truly believe if they didn't want us to see them, we wouldn't see them.
Yeah, I mean, there's the cloaking devices and all that stuff. I'm sure in the future they're something that can be had, and again, just with the cell technology we have, we can keep radar from seeing aircraft. So
I mean,
we're that much further ahead. Yeah, no big deal.
We're experimenting with the idea of using small mirrors and small cameras to blend ourselves, right? So I guess to take an image from above and then repeat it upon the screens and mirrors to almost make you like you're not there. And that's just what we're thinking about now. Imagine, again, add some thousands of years to that. Who knows?
Yep. Oh, you're right on target, man. Right on target.
Yeah, I read a lot. I watch a lot of documentaries, and I've always been fascinated by technology, science, biology, and these are things when people watch TV, I'm home watching documentaries. Like last night, I watched the JFK documentary. It's with Oliver Stone. And now I'm going to have to reach out to someone on that because there's stuff about that I didn't even know. I have a guy coming on because I watched a documentary with O.J. Simpson. I have the guy coming on soon to talk about that because there's stuff about that I didn't know. So I like learning.
Just make sure your number's unpublished. And
yeah.
Anyway, I'm just
no, so. I don't. I believe me. I've had to make a few emails and close down some. I've learned.
Gotcha. I'm sure.
So
because you tread into some interesting territory there.
Yeah. You get some bizarre requests, bizarre statements made, and people making inquiry into things that I've heard, this podcast in itself hasn't been advertised yet. I'm going to start advertising this podcast probably the end of this month, and so it's basically word of mouth is how you're seeing the numbers, and even that, there's people that have listened to the episodes and they're kind of talking about the theory I formed. Again, to be clear with everyone. My theory is based on imagination and what I've learned. I put those together. It's not science backed. So, that being said, for you, in the amount of years you've had to investigate with a military background, are you getting any pushback from like anyone in military about your investigating?
Not at all. Even when I was in uniform, nobody. The closest thing to anything like that was there was about a month period where I was on 3 or 4 TV shows, and I actually ended up on the Encounters TV show when I interviewed a Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Lloyd who had a really creditable UFO sighting over the Florence, Colorado area, all part of that NORAD incident thing. And I think I might have sent you his witness statement on that, but if I didn't, I'll get it to you.
Yeah.
And, it was rather fascinating. But no, nobody ever really said, one time my brigade commander kind of said, "Hey, Captain Alexander, come on, have a walk with me." So we walked out, and he says, "Steve, what's going on with all this UFO stuff? I've seen you on TV a couple times this week." And I said, "Sir, hey, it's just an interest of mine. I'm not out to change the world and to change anything, but been fascinated with subjects since I was a kid, and I will never do anything to in any way, shape, or form, affect my leadership and my ability to serve as an officer in this brigade and in the U.S. Army and what have you." And he's okay. So yeah, that's the closest we got to anything, and that was just no big deal there.
It makes you wonder. Like it makes me wonder for the military people I'd spoken to, even yourself. Lou Elizondo, he broke free with some of the stories, some of the video footage. But I'm under the impression he probably knows a lot more. He's just by oath not allowed to speak it. Does that seem about right?
I would think. I'm sure there's probably many people that you'll talk to, maybe talk to already, that you will in the future, that they'll give you the 80% solution that they know, and then the other 20 will be in the back of their mind and saying, "I wish I could say this, but I better not."
Right.
So
right.
I think you'll run into that on occasion if you haven't already.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of that stems from, like, I can imagine if you're an F-117 pilot, the stealth fighter, or as it is really a bomber, and you have an incident, you can't speak to it because 90% of the time, when those planes were up, they were on classified missions. So it's not even if they were publicly able to say, "I saw this," because then they're going to get into the when, who, what, where. They can't speak that.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Navy thing and the TikTok sightings, I guess that's what we're calling them.
Right.
I think that opened up a lot of lives, and that. But again, those flights were back. That was from 2004, right? So here it took 16, 17 years later before that stuff's revealed.
Right, and keep in mind those weren't sorties, right? Those weren't classified missions. Those were just
that's just routine,
right? War games in a sense. And even the one off the coast of Florida, on the west coast, east coast of Florida, where you had the gimbal and the go fast. Those are those are just drills, right? They're out there, they're practicing touch and goes and et cetera. So they could more, and that took years to get out in the open. And those are just practice. Now imagine how many classified or military operations are happening. They can't speak of it because now you're getting into the where were you when you saw this? They can't speak it. And
so sure. And I'm sure there's a whole world of intelligence up there with the satellites and the aerial surveillance. And, there's a lot going on beyond the scenes there. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned this at all, but I wrote a bunch of books. Some of them are sci-fi based, actually, where it's actually, I believe in the underground bases that they might have had across the country, and the whole idea that the president could go down, 15 floors in the White House, get in a tram and go all the way to California to March Air Force Base and never come above the surface. I do believe that's.
I believe that's very possible. That's beyond
I,
possible.
I absolutely believe that, and I think that there's a network that runs all over. I think there's we see what there is, and then there's a whole nother that maybe that 20 years in advanced technology that's underground. That
yeah, that being said, again, here's something I noticed in recent news. The Chinese were experimenting with hypersonic missiles, and we didn't really have a response. I don't feel like we needed to. That tells me one or two things. If we're not on the news talking, because you know how the news is, they take a small story and they make a thread out of it immediately, right? I didn't hear too big a response. It makes me wonder what it is that we have that, we could kind of sit back and say, well, we're not really concerned about that.
I would think so. Again, just American military technology is pretty far up there, pretty far advanced. So, yeah, certainly if we have any countermeasures and this, that, and the other thing, we're not going to talk about it. And, we had the Patriot missile system to block out, rockets and mortars, and rockets specifically, that was being worked on 10, 15 years probably before anybody even knew about it.
Yeah. You remember long ago, President Reagan discussed a Star Wars program where we would have lasers that would be able, and keep in mind, hypersonic missile or no hypersonic missile, it's not traveling faster than light. And that's essentially a laser is the speed of light. It's the tracking and tracing part that might take the time. But as far as a laser getting to the rocket, instantly. And ironically enough, you don't hear, I haven't heard anything more about Star Wars program since I was a kid. So I would imagine we have things that A is, in a black project somewhere not being discussed, or B, it's functional and ready. It's just we don't speak of it. So that's my thoughts on that. Now, using that, it makes me wonder how much UFO activity is detected by satellites that we don't speak about. I imagine it's a large number.
I would think so. I would think that NORAD's busy every night with watching things and Space Command and all of that. So, again, this is stuff we'll never hear about, that, the captain or the major that saw the stuff on the screen or the image or whatever. He just goes home and puts it out of his head and goes back to work the next night or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So
let me ask your opinion on something.
Sure.
Let's go back to Roswell. What is your opinion on Roswell? Because I hear a lot of mixed things. I mean, I've had some military people speak about it and say it was cover for a project we were working on, or it could have been Russians. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think the thing was called Skyhook. They had these giant weather balloons that they would send up to 100,000 feet or more, even higher perhaps. But I think something crashed. I think that. There's enough credible evidence, and I can't remember the guy that ran the funeral home. I can't remember his name now, but being called to take the caskets out there for the four of them, as I understood, and then that they put them on a airplane to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the bodies of the ETs. And in the meantime, we've all seen the newspaper where UFO Roswell crash, and then the next day, the general in Dallas or whatever says, it's nonsense. Not true. It was mistaken. But, I do believe there might have been the metal out there that, you could bend it and it would go back into its regular shape, which would be the kind of a material you would like to have on a spaceship coming across the galaxy. And so I think something happened there. I think there's probably been, numerous other crashes as well that have happened that, again, they've got craft hid here, there, and everywhere. And in fact, one of my sci-fi novels, I actually take the engine from the Roswell crash, turn it into a time machine where guys can go back and do this, do that, and the other thing. But so I think there's been plenty. And in fact, in the early 90s, there was this place called Pinyon Canyon Training Site for the U.S. Army down in southern Colorado. And I don't know where it got started, but somebody said, well, that's the front for basically that's the UFO retrieval unit that, when there's a UFO crashes in Germany or wherever it might be, that's actually where the unit deploys from. They leave this remote out of the middle of nowhere base in Colorado with their C-130s and whatever else, connect with C-17s and C-5s if they need them later on. But those are the guys that go out and recover the crashed spacecraft.
Yeah, with Roswell. So me as a kid, we're going to talk about me as a kid. I wasn't a skeptic. I was more of a logical thinker. Younger me, smarter than me now, right? Just me now just knows more information. Younger me, when I first heard Roswell, it was fantastic. I was like, wow, the alien bodies, a crash from UFO. And then when you absorb that, I started to wonder later on in my teens, like, I wonder if we had a project, because I was really fascinated by the stealth program as a kid, right? Bear in mind, we didn't know about the F-117s, B-2s until, what was it, like Gulf War? They were...
decade or two, after they were actually designed and probably first built in the test models that flew out of Groom Lake.
Right. So when you hear about the nuclear, or our stealth program, like, wow, you're fascinated by it. And you're like, well, I wonder what they were testing out there that might have crashed. And again, there's that smoke screen, the scapegoat is they initially said, well, put out there's UFO and then recant it. And then now they're hyper focused on the idea of it being a UFO. However, it was a program we were running that we really didn't want our adversaries to know we were running. And that's how I was thinking then. And I kind of sort of swim around the same idea now, because to me, how does a sophisticated technology crash? It's not impossible. Nothing's perfect. It could be something as simple as, if you think about what their technology is, I kind of think they're using frequencies, or if they're using antimatter, whatever they're using. If you get struck by lightning or some abnormality in our atmosphere, it's unclear. Something could have caused them to crash. Do crashes happen with a sophisticated technology? Sure, it's inevitable, because again, nothing's perfect. It draws me to, like, there was another incident in Pennsylvania where something had crashed and it was bell-shaped. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I've seen yeah, I do.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because I'm trying to put my mind around that. That's like 30 years ago now, right? 30 years. Yeah, going way back when. I think, credible witnesses have seen things all over the world. In fact, I go back to the Bentwaters thing over in England, where the military was directly involved in this thing, and they've there have been specials done on that in different shows and documentaries. So I think the military's had a lot of encounters with this stuff, and I think that it's unfortunate maybe that doesn't all go public, but we both understand why. Whether it's if we all found out that there's an ET force just on the other side of the moon waiting to come get us, that there'd be a run on the banks, and again, there'd be no food on the shelves at Walmart or anywhere else. So
yeah, I mean, I'm related to some of these people. There's these people, they believe God made here and here alone, and everything else could either be the enemy or it's just horseshit in their eyes. But
you know
how many people are on this planet that don't kill other people because of literature and a book? The only real fear they have is going to hell. If you tomorrow say there's life here, there's life elsewhere, and it's plentiful, it's going to take some of the diehard believers and put them in a position of like, well, what the hell was I believing my whole life? And
yeah, well, I come from this kind of point of view that, I don't know if you're familiar with Sedona, Arizona, but there's some geological rock formations down there that look very much. There's one that looks like the Capitol building. There's one that looks like the Greek Parthenon. There's this, all kinds of Egyptian looking, stuff down there. And so, I'm perfectly wide open to the idea that, ancient civilizations were on this planet, and they said, let's go explore some, and then, maybe they never came back, or maybe they did. But
I mean, there's the other thing too. There's how many. I listen to a lot of Graham Hancock, and it's not impossible that there's been multiple I don't want to say genocide, like apocalyptic moments on this planet where life here's stopped. The dinosaurs are 65 million years ago, give or take. This planet's 4.5 billion years old ish, and if there was an intelligent civilization, let's say 1 billion years ago on this planet, and yeah, granted the atmosphere is different, granted there's probably more or less oxygen, but we see what life does on this planet. It acclimates, it adjusts. So whatever lived then, maybe it was far more different. Maybe that the atmosphere was greater in oxygen, so beings like us would be larger, like giants in a sense, right?
Yeah, and yeah, did the Egyptians get help by ETs building the pyramids?
Right.
I'm open to that idea. I certainly am. I say,
Yeah, so the fossil record from 1 billion years ago would be unrecoverable. We wouldn't find it.
Yeah.
Not anywhere in sediment, nowhere. It's 1 billion years ago. I mean, they say if mankind left the planet right now, it would be. I watched a show, and I can't remember the name of the show. It was on History Channel, but after a couple million years, you would almost have no trace of us at all. Not even the structures we've built, the large buildings. It would be reclaimed by the planet. And if you add 1 billion years to that, it's gone. It's non-existent.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, we're finding Egyptian, tombs still today. That's only been 6, 7, 8,000 years. So
yeah, and we're starting to
add another
assume
40 to 50 on that.
Yeah, I mean, you could assume longer too, because what we have today is steel and glass and other materials. Those stones are solid, tons and tons per stone. That if anything could last the test of time over the course of millions of years, that's it. That's what's going to last. And it's so. That being said, is it impossible that a greater civilization once upon a time made them, and then new mankind found it and oh, that's cool. We'll refit it, and the gods made it for us. We're going to refit it, like the Sphinx, the face of the Sphinx. I think they altered that to their liking. I think because it doesn't quite fit the body of that creature, right? It's smaller by scale, so it means they carved away at it to make the face that's on it presently. So that's just the way I think, anyway.
Yeah, I'm open to the idea that, and again, in the big picture, why would if he created the universe and everything out there, why would he put all of his eggs in one basket,
right?
A planet called Earth around one sun in a solar system that's, we may just be, one of 100,000 civilizations, maybe somewhere Adam and Eve didn't screw it up, don't know.
I mean, consider there's an advanced life form that's monitoring us. It's kind of selfish to think we're the only one. I mean, there could be very well, we now know there's other star systems. We know there's other galaxies. There's probably another Earth-like planet all spread through the universe, and they're watching all of them. And we're just one channel of many, Yeah,
there you go. That's one way to look at it too. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, if they're 10,000 years ahead of us, give or take, and they're that sophisticated, they've found life elsewhere. And it's one big science study or entertainment study at this. Look, take what we do. As humans, we watch animals in the wild. We put things in laboratories and experiment them. There's a frog. That's why when people say abduction's crazy, why would they do that? Well, clearly there's something of our genealogy that they're interested in. There's a frog in that's it's asexual. It's very immune to disease, and we're still cutting this thing open. We're still cutting animals open to learn how they tick. We abduct animals all the time. It's still life. It doesn't. Do you think a frog wants to be captured and dissected? It wants to go out. Yeah, it wants to catch bugs and hop around. It doesn't want to be in a cage.
No. I'm a little bit like that. I'm big on animal rights because they have no say in what happens to them for the most part. They have nothing. So
right.
Anytime I have to, if I'm watching a show and it's poaching the elephant, I'm rooting for the elephant.
Right. And consider what our visitors are doing to us. You never heard of anyone being killed by one. They return you. They do their study, whether you like it or not, and they return you to your environment nonetheless. Exactly where you live, the place you're happiest. We don't return animals to their environment very often when we get them. We cut them open or we put them in a cage. And so at the end of the day, when people call into question the behavior of these visitors, they should really call into question our behavior, because our behavior is far more savage. Way more savage in comparison.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah, it makes all the sense in the world. If they wanted to do a sin, they would have done a sin already. And we're in their test tube.
Exactly, and at least we're free to roam, right? So
yeah.
So for you, what are some of the UFO cases that caught your eye as something that, beyond a shadow of doubt, real story?
Roswell, of course, is the big thing. I look back to some of the glass works in churches in Europe where they have the little UFO images, that have been up in this stained glass window for 500 years, whatever. Those get my attention. The that island. I can't think. I get hit in the head in Iraq, so I don't remember things as much as I used to. But there's the island with the statues, that all look like.
Oh yeah, Easter Island.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. And there's the crop circles I struggle with. I still don't think that was Elmer and Jethro with a 2x4 and rope going over doing all that stuff. But right. I don't have any other answers, and I don't think the wind's that good of a surgeon. But
yeah, I mean, if you want to, so for crop formations, perhaps some are fake. Perhaps let's say the majority are faked, but they learned it from something, right? Because the Escalines, we see the Escalines, we were clearly there's no reason for us to make these large images that you can only see from like the air, other than to convey a message of something we think is above us, right? So yeah. Fast forward to the crop formations. Humans, like animals, like an example would be apes. Apes observe us right back as we observe them. And they have watched us using sticks and tools. And there's a case of an ape that watched man hunting fish, and they're replicating it. They're getting sticks and trying to catch fish with it. They watch us do it. So now we as humans, because it's fascinating, we see a crop formation very intricately made, and we try to copy it for both entertainment and for curiosity and for the sake of maybe trying to communicate back. It's what we do. We copy what we see. So initially, the crop formations, the original ones, had to stem from something that we wouldn't naturally do. It was learned. So people want to discredit that, but I say, what was the motivation to do it from the beginning? Or geometrical, some are very mathematically put together. It makes no sense for such as, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a really complex equation in a field somewhere. And predicated on what? So.
Yeah, and your buddy's, 2 days behind you is going to fly over that, and he's going to see it. Maybe it's a direction. Maybe it's a map.
Right.
Maybe go here, go there.
Right. So, all right. So before we close out,
sure,
we'll get into this. Where do you predict us in the next 10 years as far as ufology and the government?
Man, I've struggled with that. Again, I thought when when President Trump 45 went into office, I figured by the end of the 4 years it'd all be on the table. That I figured it'd all be scattered out. Bring your cameras, bring everything. This is what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. And for whatever reason that didn't happen. I still haven't figured that out. But I think, and I think. I don't know that anything's going to change in the next 6 or 7 years. America's in a unique place there. I think probably depending on who you talk to and what you believe and what you're, whether you're red or blue or whatever, or independent. I think after these midterm elections will determine a lot. And I think the presidential election in 2024, I think probably by 2026, we'll have a better idea what the answer is going to be. Right now, I don't see anybody giving any kind of big revelation in the next 4 years. On the other hand, let's say there's a change of, president, whatever coming up. Maybe this president's in office now. It's going to be the guy that says, okay, here it is, guys. And maybe that'll be his last great play.
Yeah, I think there's some pressure on the government because you have private industry going up, like Jeff Bezos from Amazon, and you got the other billionaires that are racing. Yeah, it's like a race. They literally want to create a cruise for obviously the wealthy to go around the moon and have dinners and like you would go on a cruise here at a ship at a Carnival cruise line. You can now take a spaceship, and who's going to be on that is celebrities, and celebrities document everything. We see what they do with Instagram. Imagine they get up there and they're by the moon and they see something. The amount of photos and videos will be viral instantly. So I think there's a bit of pressure on the government and I think that's why we're seeing more of this disclosure, because they're like, whoa, what are we going to do? The billionaires are going up. You
make a great point, because you're exactly right. Because I think once it breaks, it's going to break wide open. There's going to be no suppressing it. There'll be no, holding back the news. There will be nothing like that. I think it'll be. That's and what is going to be that trigger point where the government says, okay, we got to. Open up the vault, let them see it.
Yeah, because Bezos is now talking about putting a crew together to fly out into space, and with the intentions of orbiting the moon. Again, he wants his cruise, and then you got the owner of Virgin. He wants to replicate something near that, and there's other billionaires like, well, if they're going to do it, I'm going to do it. And before you know it, these very wealthy people are going to be up there hanging out. It's
unless we as a civilization totally do ourselves in. I think, the day when, the 1701 USS Enterprise, I think that probably will be out there.
Yeah.
And it probably looked a lot like the one on TV in the 1960s.
It's coming. It's coming. It's not far, because we know Space Force. Elon's going to Mars. We're gonna terraform, but to do that, we're gonna have to make a proving ground like the moon. So because missions to Mars from the moon, effortless, because it takes a lot of fuel to escape our environment here on Earth. From the moon, it's effortless. So it makes sense to make camps there, and then on top of which, we want to, there's like this race to get there before China, because, China gets there, like it's hours, so now we're going back to the moon as soon as 2025. From what I understand, we have a mission planned to the moon with the first female, I believe, astronaut that's going to step onto the moon by 2025, I believe.
I would think that would make sense. And just, one thing we didn't even talk about, if we got 10 seconds more,
all the
astronauts that have reported seeing things like, Ed Mitchell was a huge advocate that there's something out there. And there's always the story that, I think it was Gordon Cooper talked about chasing aliens, spacecraft in the late 1950s in his F-104, across the skies of Europe. So,
that's another thing. A lot of these guys are speaking this towards the end of their life, because in their mind, like, well, what do I got to fear? Right.
Yeah, I got nothing to lose now. So
and there's going to be no reprisal for their relatives, because at the end of the day, he spoke something, and they probably don't even know what he truly thinks or knows, right? Because that's how you would protect a relative. The less they know, the better. So it makes me wonder how many of so imagine the generation of astronauts from like the 90s and 2000s, as they start getting towards, that part of their life where they're like, listen, here it is. Let's lay it out. I mean, it's on the TV. We're already having disclosure. Let's talk about this now. It's eventually going to come out. And I think, again, the people that are going to pioneer that kind of disclosure are going to be these billionaires because they're competing to see who could go to space for longer, for better, or for, when that happens, the government's back's against the wall, and the writing's already on the wall in Europe. Europe's a little bit.
How many times has NASA or whoever had to turn off the camera on the International Space Station because it saw something that that they don't want people to see? And they used to broadcast that live. Now they got like a half-hour delay or something like that, just in case. So
they make room for error with the latency. There's that blackout moment for the Apollo mission where they went around the moon, and allegedly, it's alleged that there was another channel they switched to, which I don't doubt. In fact, it has to be true, because there are definitely some things in a mission that they would only want to convey a message to the people in control rather than the public.
Well, there's always the story that when Aldrin and Armstrong were on the moon, looking across the crater, they never put a camera towards that way because there was somebody sitting over there watching them. And whether true or false, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
and if we have observers that are monitoring our evolution, that's definitely going to be part of the monitoring. Our military, why do they? Someone asked me this question once: why are they watching our nukes in our military so closely? Why were they the Foo Fighters that are around in World War II? Because that's a huge part of what the story of Earth. These people are violent. let's observe.
Yeah, they're not going to let us join their club until we can prove we can, not screw up. And we haven't done that yet.
Yeah. On top of which, I had another question asked to me. Why didn't they get involved in World War II? A lot of lives were lost. Well, I'll tell you why. On National Geographic, when you're watching a pride of lions and another pride of lion or another couple of males come in to kill one male, and they're killing all the cubs, that's genocide. But it's nature, and our job's to observe it, not to get involved. Right? As we are let's say we're hypothetically speaking, we're the National Geographic channel for them. They can't get involved.
There you go. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unless they hit us with the car, then they're obligated. And that's the case with, I think, with a number of people where they see something, they run to it, they get injured. And they're like, shit, now we got to fix this guy,
Yeah.
that's about the brunt of it. Anyway, Steve, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we're going to do it again. Is there if there's anything you want to add or any kind of links you want?
No, just my last statement here is that, I don't know what you know about it, but I'm a filmmaker. I've actually been, made probably 8 or 9 movies now, and I've won some film festivals and stuff. I've got a lot of UFO related scripts that I'm trying to get out there marketed, because I do think that's one way to help get the word out, and keep the sci-fi semi-real versus,
Sure.
The more extreme stuff. But yeah, so I think be interesting to watch the years and months, years ahead.
I fully believe some of the science fiction we see. I think this is just my personal belief. It could sound like conspiracy, but it makes me wonder how much of it is collaborated with governments. Like, all right, let's drip feed this information and plant this seed, so later on it's not such a big boom into them. Right? I mean,
We've heard that.
Yeah, I mean, how much science fiction is today's fact, right? Cell phones, FaceTime, things that were in movies long ago that were like we consider to be nonsense is, it's practical applications today.
Yeah, so, I mean, the Johnny Quest TV show I watched when I was a kid in 1964. Right. And Dr. Van Quest is holding a cell phone, talking to Race Bannon in 1964.
Exactly.
So here we are.
Yeah, and to add to that, a lot of today's technology that we enjoy was yesterday's technology for military application. It wasn't public. So
yeah, I heard Teflon is actually a NASA creation, and we all cook breakfast with it now. So there you go.
Agreed. So, all right. Well, whoever's listening, I'm going to say good day, good evening, good night, whatever it is for you. I'm going to talk to Stephen Post. And Steve, thank you again.
Hey, Adam, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And thank you very much for having me on your show.